Hi, I'm Steve Hassan, and I'm delighted to have with me Rachel Thomas. Hi, Rachel, who's in Texas. And Rachel and I have met a bunch of years ago through Carissa Phelps at a big training for like 600 law enforcement people, if I remember correctly. Homeland Security and CIA and all these big shots. And it was an opportunity to teach them about trafficking and to understand mind control and to treat people who've been recruited into trafficking by pimps and traffickers to realize that they're really victims of mind control and need to be treated with respect and they can actually be helped. And through that, we met and we talked and we you had told me you were familiar with combating cult mind control, I believe, and we just got together and said, you said, let's develop a program to help young women to understand pimp mind control, and that became Ending the Game. So, Rachel, Ending the Game has had 5 year anniversary, if I'm correct. So, why don't you share a little bit of your story, if you don't mind, and what Ending the Game is doing these days?
Sure. Ending the Game is in our fifth year of becoming public. So, meaning that we're training other agencies to use it with their survivors. And right now, we're in 35 states. We have about 1,000 trained facilitators reaching hundreds of survivors. And the feedback is always that this curriculum is a missing link to their healing, to understand the psychological coercion part of it, to, understand why even after they're brought physically out of a situation, sometimes those mental bonds to a trafficker or to the lifestyle of trafficking are still there. And so this curriculum, with the help of combating cult mind control and a lot of the consulting, that you and I did, it helped me understand my experience,
Hmm.
and I could say that for a lot of survivors, there's you don't understand how you got so deep into something. And so when I learned about identity disturbance and I learned about the methodology of shifting someone's identity and breaking down their personhood and instilling new beliefs and new values, and really how that happens in cults is very similar to the way that it happens when you're under the control of a pimp who you don't know is a pimp. They seem like a boyfriend, or like in my case, a modeling agent. But it's those same tactics of control that after a while you're like, who am I now and where did the real me go?
Right, so I want to jump in, if I may, and just say you were 19 and a student at Emory College.
Emory University, yep.
Emory University in Atlanta. What were you studying?
I was an English major, African American studies minor.
Uh-huh, great. And you were approached by women who said you're beautiful, you should be a model.
Yeah, I was at a popular college hangout near campus, and actually the agent approached me first, wearing a three,
Okay.
handed me a business card, told me I was beautiful, and that he would, love to help me start my modeling career. And I brushed him off because I had heard that before, and I was, in school to be a teacher. Um, and so it was half hour later that the girl came up to me, and she
Hmm.
and singing his praises and says, "Hey, we cannot take our eyes off of you. I'm here with Mike. Can you just come talk to us?" And so, not wanting to be rude to a peer, and her being my age and a nice, friendly young face, then that's what made me go with her to their table, and that's when Mike, did the rest of his spiel, and we exchanged numbers and stuff like that.
Right. So one universal of mind control cults is the deceptive recruitment piece. And you were a college student from a great family, spiritual, and the last thing in the world, just like the last thing for me to join a right-wing fascist cult with a Korean billionaire leader, the last thing you had in your life, that you would be taken advantage of the way this guy did.
Mhm.
But to people can find out your story, but I want to skip and just say that you got away and you helped the law enforcement to have him arrested.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a nice way of saying it, but really, I had become a recruiter for him.
Hmm.
One of the other girls that he began, abusing and victimizing got the courage to go to the police despite all the threats of violence and everything. And so she gave my name and number to the police.
Got it.
In order to avoid being charged as a recruiter, I had to cooperate in the investigation.
Hmm.
That time, I still was a little bit, mentally bonded to him, and still didn't think that he deserved as bad a punishment as they were going after when they told me, that he's up for 30 to life. I'm like, he wasn't that bad. And I still had, some attachment and not, not,
Sure.
and
No, it's you were in a mind control relationship, and it was, in my professional opinion, a commercial cult mind control situation. Um, and so the course is 10 sessions,
Mhm.
right? Why don't you explain force, fraud, and coercion and the definition of trafficking and what's covered in ending the game, if you don't mind.
Sure. So the federal definition of sex trafficking is causing a person to engage in commercial sexual exploitation by use of force, fraud, or coercion. So those are the three means of trafficking according to the federal definition. And when we think about it, force, that one is, we can understand that the gun to the head, the handcuffs, some of those more brutal images that we see in the media about trafficking.
Hmm.
Fraud, a lot of times, someone is lured over here with the promise of something that's, immigrants oftentimes are lured with, citizenship, or in my case, the modeling agency scam, some overt fraud that after you realize it, that could, be corrected in a day where it's like, oh, that was a lie. But the coercion piece, just the psychological manipulation, the systematic indoctrination, that's harder to understand for the average person, for a jury, for law enforcement, and even for the person who's living through it. And
Right.
that's really where we see the mind control come in.
And of course, combating talks about behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control, or the bite model
We added in
that's applied,
spiritual control too.
and spiritual control, absolutely. Do you want to say a little bit more about spiritual control?
Yeah, that was, we added, and we do use the bite model in the curriculum. We call it bites, adding on that S at the end.
Uh-huh.
And the spiritual control is really making someone believe that this is their spiritual destiny, or that the trafficker has godlike powers to, read their thoughts. I know you're about to run. I know you're about to call the police. And if, and just making, or even using Bible verses or religious texts to justify why, that situation is happening. My trafficker was very well versed in the Bible, and he would often quote verses, like, um, all authority is sent by God, and he says, and I'm an authority of you. This is training. God is sending me here to teach you, X, Y, or Z. And so
And isn't your dad or wasn't your dad a deacon in the church?
yeah, my dad was a deacon in the church. I was raised in the church, and so that was, I think, because I didn't have, a trauma-filled childhood that he could exploit. Then that was a different way, just to, it's to control me.
But it's a standard technique of mind controllers to find out the background of their mark, of their victim, and then use it to flip them to be dependent and obedient. But I also want to just comment and say, when we met, I remember saying to you, I've helped people in the Children of God cult, and Moses David Berg would send women out to be happy hookers for Jesus, right? And flirty fishing. And it's my theory that it was people running away from that cult or who were born in that cult who had no skills, no life skills, no education, landed out on the street, and that's how where pimps and traffickers recruit a lot of young kids are runaways from all kinds of situations, and they were sharing these Bible verses with pimps, and they were like, "Oh, that's pretty slick. Let's use the New Testament to, you know, get to people and such." That's just the theory, but I think it makes a lot of sense where pimps got this from.
Mhm.
But so let's talk about as a Black American woman, what's going on in our country, the systemic racism. When I mentioned to you that, hey Rachel, I called you up. Hey Rachel, I took the bite model. I added kidnapping, lynching, you know, murder, and a few things. And doesn't the bite model apply to historical slavery in the United States? And you said, yes, Steve. I describe, you know, say what you want to say about that, please.
Yeah, when we're talking about historical slavery and we talk about, the slave owner's goals back then, and then we relate that to a pimp or a trafficker's goals, it is to have that external locus of control, right? It is to be able to control someone and to act in the slave owner's best interest, even above that person's own best interest. And so, you know, um, I believe in slavery, 1865? So we're 150 years out from literal slavery.
Yeah.
And I really think that the state of, of Black people in America, if we were considered to be like a family, this is all PTSD of generational trauma. The way that so many Black fathers are absent due to incarceration or just due to having that history of being ripped away. When Black people were bred like cattle, there was no, respect for family bonds. And so, just back from slavery, the idea of a family just being separated, just like, oh, this woman just had a new litter, send that kid there, that kid there, that kid there. And after the breeding happened, there was not even any more between the mother and father. And so that's one of many examples of how, the indoctrination set up during historical slavery is still something that is happening in the Black communities.
Right. And so if you had your way, what would you like to see? What would in your mind be so vital for America to get out of the this period that we're in and like get on track towards a more equitable human rights and justice, platform, do you think?
You know, um, I really believe in some form of making things fair. In back in a couple of decades ago, it was affirmative action, and I believe that everyone is not starting from the same starting point. Some people of European descent, they may get into a college because their grandfather went there. I don't know one single Black person whose grandmother or father went to any university. And so those are the things, how getting jobs, getting loans, just being able to compete in the American capitalist system. And so I think, if I had my real wish, it would be giving Black kids the same chance that any other kid gets. So some better schooling, neighborhoods that aren't traumatic just to live in due to, crime and pesticides. I mean, there's so many ways that the average Black child born in America just does not have the same chance as other kids.
Right. And of course, you're a role model for so many people, and I know about your great work and just saying to young women who are getting away from a pimp or a trafficker, you're too good for him, and you deserve, you're a special human being, and you deserve to have a life and have happiness and joy and be in control of your own existence.
Mhm.
Maybe you can, I'm putting on the spot, but maybe you could share a story, maybe, of someone that was helped by your direct intervention or through one of the ending the game classes that you taught.
And we have so many. So many. Well, one thing I can talk about is actually one of the ladies from our pilot group back in 2014 when we
Hmm.
had the curriculum at a group home in LA County.
Yeah.
And this one young lady, she first of all was referred to the class because out of the 11 students referred to the class, only 4 self-identified as being trafficked. The other 7 thought it was a boyfriend, but they had disclosed, some hints to their therapist or their social worker, or they'd been arrested for prostitution. But she was one of the ones that did not self-identify as being trafficked, but she was referred to the class. And on the first day, the pre and post evaluation, one of the questions on there was how much do you miss your boyfriend, or your the trafficker.
Hmm.
And she put a 5 out of 5 that she really missed him. And so we caught up with her after class after reading her evaluation and said, hey, it seems like you really, are feeling it right now. Like, you're missing him. And she's like, yeah, I was just gonna go to the movies with him this weekend. Just he said we can go to the movies. And she was 15 at the time.
Mm.
So this is one that her caseworkers had told me, he would leave her messages under the bushes at the front, and she would go, read his messages and put one for him. And they were communicating even while she was in this placement. And basically, I begged her not to go that weekend, just, please don't. And she stuck with the class. And by week 5, she realized that he was not a boyfriend. Her exact words were, yeah, he protected me, but the situations I needed protection from are the ones he put me in. And
Mm.
began to realize, really what was being done to her by this 35-year-old guy. And she was like, I'm done with him and I want to go to school to be a lawyer, to
Wow.
like this. And she graduated from the class. She spoke at the graduation. And to this day, she is completing her junior college and she is planning to stay on that track to becoming a lawyer.
Oh, cool. That's a great story.
And it's so empowering that you feel empowered. Not that you were a stupid person that got, just caught up in a bad situation, but you feel power to not only get yourself out of it, but that you have the tools now to undo some of the tools being used against people.
Yeah, that's great. And you touched on a few things that bears talking a little bit more about, which is how many people get recruited when they're a minor. I was surprised to hear so many people who are 13 years old, 14 years old. Is it still a statistic that people are like 14 years old when they're being recruited in the United States into trafficking?
Actually, the statistic is 12. The average age of recruitment is 12.
12. And I learned in my research that some pimps would literally just stake out, middle schools and look for who's walking home alone, and can I buy you an ice cream, or you want to see my puppy or whatever, just to begin an interaction with a young person and to appear to be, not dangerous, and then that some young people are being trafficked and they're living at home and their parents don't even know. I was
Yeah.
shocked to hear that is going on in the U.S.
Yes. What we're seeing now with the explosion of just the internet and social media, especially with the pandemic, and now kids are on their phone more than they even used to be, there's a lot of solicitation going on online. There's a lot of webcamming. There's a lot of exploitation happening right from the phone, which usually does lead to in person, oh, let's meet up, or oh, I'm going to fly you out here. But there's a whole lot of exploitation happening through phone in the child's bedroom while the parents are cooking dinner.
Yep. And another thing you taught me, Rachel, was just about the music industry and all the messaging, making pimping cool. Like pimping out was a cool word. And I've since, because you brought it to my attention, I talked to a marketing expert who talked about pimping your blog out. And I said, in the world of helping people who've been trafficked, the last thing you want to use is the term pimp in a positive
Oh my God.
way to promote your business. So he said in the next edition, I'm taking it out. But talk about music and cultural influences that move young people to, sexual deviance and trafficking.
Sure. The media, oh my goodness, that's another one of those things that in today's world, the youth of today's generations are dealing with stuff that none of us had to deal with and no one before us either. And what we're seeing, the pimping thing, and it's not only for urban music, there's misogyny in all genres of music, right? From country to emo. I mean, any of just it's popular to objectify women.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, however, what we're seeing now is women calling it the new feminism, the new female empowerment, to make money off of your body, to use what you got to get what you want. And so this messaging, a lot of role models, for these young ladies will be another woman who's young, beautiful, rich, successful, has millions of Instagram followers, fame, and everything that they want in life. And these lyrics are talking about you know having people pay you for your body. And so it's now considered by some, female empowerment. And there's heated debates going on about, is sex work female empowerment? And, a lot of this, there's so many factors that play into it that, I think the media industry, they are, pushing that needle and promoting this and signing people who are willing to talk about it and be kind of, puppets on a string. However, I also think that it is also out of, a lack of options for a young person. And we're not even just talking about, Black youth, any youth. What other way could a 16-year-old make $500, in a weekend? And so if we're saying the only way that you're going to make that much money as a minor, because no job is paying that, no internship is paying that, school doesn't pay you to go to school, that's really a lot of the lure in too. And so the more that we desensitize the objectification of women and, just thinking in terms of sexuality and payment and things like that, it's becoming something that is becoming more mainstream,
Right.
and that overall indoctrination of turning a person's view of themselves from a person into like a product, putting a dollar sign on myself and getting used to the idea of, being paid for sexual things. It's just, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
So, another thing that I learned, in researching was there are a lot of different types of pimps. There are some pimps that will try to get the people hooked on drugs and put them into pornography. But I guess I want to ask you to talk about your take on the whole trauma. Like what talk as if there's a 15-year-old saying, "Yeah, I need $500. It's a fast way to make $500." And if the guy's cute, what's wrong with that? Like,
Whatever.
speak about the long-term effects on people who go into that direction.
Mhm. Well, you know, there's two types of human trafficking prevention that we do. One is to how not get, victimized by a pimp. And now we're starting to talk more about why not to go into the sex industry because, so it's two different conversations. And usually the one about the trafficker, that one we can conceptualize more because the idea, I mean, a person that's actually being trafficked, the average life expectancy is 7 years. And that
Mm.
violence from the trafficker, from buyers to uncurable STDs,
Oh yeah, right.
as they're trying to numb feelings and doing drugs, and then doing drugs to stay up more, to work more, overdose, and just drugs. And so when someone is being trafficked by a third party trafficker who is driving them to work more and make more money and see more buyers, that is a life of devastating, usually pretty fast trauma that builds up quickly.
Yep.
But when there's a slower progression, when somebody is saying, hey, there's this website where I can upload a nude picture of myself and somebody cash apps me $10, and they get into it more slowly, it's not as easy to see where the road is heading. Because at first, it doesn't feel harmful, especially if you started over the internet. And so that process takes a little bit longer, but in the end result, we do see still that same need for drug use, right? That need to
Mhm.
get high or to do something to take your mind off of it because it never feels quite right. We see either the money addiction or just counting yourself out of other options. So if this is how you are making money, at a young age, you're less likely to go to school. You're less likely to pursue a different career. And so when you find yourself at 25 and this is all you've been doing for the past 7 years to make quick, fast money, now, you're even further behind on something that is sustainable. And in this industry, the older you get, the less valuable you are. Whereas in other industries, the more the experience you have in the field, the more value you have. But for this, when we see people that get into it for the fast money and look up 5 years later, and now drugs have taken a toll and they're making less money and they've broken all of their boundaries in order to, you know, um, to keep up with the demand of the buyers, they feel used and abused and drained and broken, and they're in a worse place than when they started off.
Yeah.
And
For
so,
me, as a mental health professional, it's just so devastating when you're put in an environment, given a new name, a new identity, new clothing, isolated from your family and friends and your past, and surrounded by a loaded language system, and just a lot of manipulation where you're not you're told on the one hand by some pimps that you're an independent businesswoman, but in reality you're not keeping the money. You're giving it over to the pimp, and so it doesn't connect. And then ultimately there's a lot of phobia programming, really, that this is what you've meant to be. You've been born into the world to be my person. And if you and plus there's some pimps that will say, if you try to leave, I'll kill your family. I'll kill you, and such. And that
kids, who's gonna want to take you seriously now? You've already, lived a life as a prostitute. Now you're an outcast. This is where you need to stay. Uh-huh.
right. Nobody will love you. Nobody will take care of you like I can take care of you, the pimp says. And of course, the pimp is just, as you were correctly saying, he's just thinking, how much money can he make? How long can he use a particular person till he finds a younger person to that's more attractive, and more saleable. And I guess we haven't talked about labor trafficking explicitly, but there are so many people who are just looking to earn a living who get deceived thinking they can come to America or whatever. They get their passports taken away, and then they're just totally coerced into slavery, modern day slavery, and it's a huge problem.
Oh my goodness, labor trafficking. And I when I wrote Ending the Game, it was for sex trafficking survivors because that is who, I've spoken most with. That's what I, survived. But we have tried the Ending the Game curriculum with labor trafficking survivors, and we're told that there are still many similarities. Maybe not so much as getting like a new name and a new identity and things like that, but the guilt and the debt bondage is huge, and the making someone believe that you owe me, you are, I did this for you, so now you're indebted to me, and you're trash and you're nothing, and you should be happy and feel lucky that I am allowing you to exist in my space. And so a lot of that same psychological manipulation is present there
Yeah,
too.
no, the bite model applies to it as well because the goal of mind control is dependence and obedience on the authority figure, and uh, there's a whole range of different techniques from sleep deprivation and dietary manipulation, rules and regulations, punishments and reinforcers, and the whole black and white, all or nothing, good versus evil mindset that's instilled, where you really don't believe you have an option other than to make your master proud or make your master happy. And it's so sad. So I want to thank you for being you. You're an amazing human being. I did include your story in the latest update of combating cult mind control. So thank you for your generosity for allowing that to be added as well. And I guess, is there any last thoughts you'd like to convey? Or we're going to put a link to endingthegame.com for people who are interested in donating or learning or connecting with their local organizations that are wanting to help survivors. What
Mhm.
else would you like to add, if anything?
Um, yeah, I one other looking at the notes and preparing for today's call is just some of the theory about how the urban, the stereotypical pimp of the Black male, how that got started was also born out of slavery, and a response to that, Black men feeling that they were not welcomed in the corporate America, they had no other option for money or clout or fame. And this is a product that they had access to when they
Yeah.
didn't have access to the market, the business market or the corporate market. And so that's how they became the local celebrities. That's why it's glorified, because the most successful Black man in the community making the most money was the one who was using the resources in the community, which is the women that they were exploiting. And so, the whole um, urban trafficker that was born out of a response to historical slavery and Black men not feeling they had options for success, money, clout.
Very, very important point. And as you were talking, I remembered I was asked to do a training for the state of Texas, actually, on their trafficking. And I met a young man who was trafficked, who was not gay, but he was trafficked to men
Mhm.
and abused that way. And he was the first male that I had met, because people think about women only, and it's not the case, and at all.
No, it's not. Lots of boys and males being trafficked as well.
Yeah. Um, well, thank you very much, and continued success, and we'll stay in touch. Any thoughts about doing a 2.0 or doing a next level for recovery for folks?
Yeah, let's do it. You know, Steve, I'm such a huge fan of your work
Mm.
and your commitment to, you know, always spreading education about mind control and applying it to current events and things like that. So, yeah, I'm forever grateful to you and combating cult mind control for what it did in my own healing and, you know, for the ending the game curriculum. And so, yeah, I'm always down for
I,
whatever.
I'm going to follow up. I'm finishing my doctorate right now, but I think there's so much more that we can do, and I think we can take the curriculum for labor trafficking victims and maybe develop a module or develop a version of it for that population as well.
Yeah.
And but I want to end by just saying, as a former cult member myself, the public is still so ignorant and they blame the victim. They say, "Oh, that person was weak or stupid." And they were looking for to be taken advantage of, and it's not my experience at all.
Yeah.
No, we're nice people who didn't understand what was going on to us and step by step deceived.
Preyed on by skilled manipulators. Yeah, and if you have no concept of manipulation and they're skilled at it, and you, yeah, that's um,
Exactly. Great. So thanks again. Stay cool being in Texas during the summertime.
thank
Okay. Thank you.